Let's set the scene. It's May 2026, just a totally normal day on Taiwan's high-speed rail network. But then, suddenly, three massive trains are unexpectedly and forcefully thrown right into an emergency stop. The whole system completely paralyzed for 48 agonizing minutes. Thousands of passengers are just stuck there. Now, you might be wondering, was this a mechanical failure? A power grid issue? No, it was actually a cyber attack. And here's the absolute wildest part. It was allegedly pulled off by a 23-year-old university student who was armed with literally nothing more than a cheap, off-the-shelf software-defined radio. I mean, how exactly does one single student bring thousands of tons of high-speed metal to a grinding halt? Well, let's dive right into this explainer and trace exactly how this happened. We'll quickly run through the 2026 railway incident itself, enter the cyber twin environment used by researchers, look at how the attacker prepared, how they injected false train data, how that triggered the emergency stop, and finally, we'll analyze the whole workflow. All right, Section 1, the 2026 railway incident. Let's look at the basic nature of the attack that brought this massive transit network down. To really get the attacker's methodology, we've got to define the specific threat they used against the railway's radio network. It's known as false data injection, or FDI spoofing. You know, instead of trying to physically break into some heavily guarded control room like you'd see in a heist movie, the attacker simply intercepts the wireless signals traveling invisibly right through the air. By analyzing those signals, they can craft falsified data packets and sneak them back into the operational system. So they aren't physically hijacking the train's brakes at all, they are hijacking the control data to trick the train into stopping itself.
Moving to Section 2, enter the cyber twin. To figure out how this disaster happened without, experimenting on actual moving passenger trains, researchers used an incredible digital tool to recreate the scene.
Using the uploaded images and data from the researchers, we can see the chaotic reality of a real-world operations control center compared directly to a simulated HQ within a cyber range. This virtual lab is called a land-based railway operational technology simulation, or just a cyber twin. It faithfully replicates the real environment from the user interfaces to the signal monitors, giving us a perfectly safe sandbox for defensive testing and attack analysis. Looking at the network topology, which is built out of 21 virtual machines split across the green and blue subnets, we can trace the exact infiltration route. If you follow the workflow path, the attacker's steps are completely visible. And get this, they didn't start deep inside some highly secure internal network. No. They started right at the edge, at the simulated radio antenna, using the open airwaves to entirely bypass traditional firewalls. It's wild. Okay, Section 3, preparing the cyber attack. Before causing any physical chaos, the attacker had to lay the groundwork. I mean, you can't just shout random commands at a train and expect it to listen, right? The attacker's prep work followed 4 really methodical steps. First, they passively eavesdropped on the radio signals, essentially just recording the traffic. Then, step 2, they decoded the highly complex Siemens S7 communication parameters. Step 3 involved using that newly decoded knowledge to forge perfectly formatted fake data. And finally, step 4 was the actual strike, injecting those spoofed signals back into the network. Check out this decoded S7 communication packet. It shows exactly how the attacker cracked the industrial protocol. By digging through data dumps, they figured out the train's telemetry structure, identifying headers, function codes, and the payload itself. It's kind of like finding a locked safe and just patiently listening to the clicks until you understand exactly how the internal gears work. By isolating one specific data block, the attacker pinpointed their ultimate target. And here's why this is absolutely crucial. This tiny little string of hex values is the exact variable that reports the train's current speed back to the control center. Once they figured out where that speed variable lived in the code, well, they essentially held the keys to the entire system. That brings us to Section 4, injecting false train data. With the format cracked and their malicious packets primed, the attacker moved from passive listening to an active strike. When you map out the full architecture of the attack, a really terrifying detail emerges. The forged packets actually bypassed the physical train completely. The attacker wasn't hacking the physical locomotive. They were injecting false data straight into the radio link management unit, essentially acting as an imposter beacon. This fed completely fake data straight up the chain into the operations control center. The deception was just absolute. In physical reality, the train is coasting along safely at a totally normal 56 kilometers per hour. But on the spoofed dashboard back at the control center, the operator sees a terrifying fiction. The injected script artificially cranked the speed gauge into the red danger zone, locking it in at over 200 kilometers per hour. Section 5. Triggering the emergency stop. This false perception of extreme danger is where the ticking clock really begins. The attacker didn't actually have a magic button to physically stop the train. Instead, their strategy was way more insidious. They weaponized the control center's own automated safety protocols against it. You see, the system is programmed to react to danger. Once that forged speed reading exceeded the safety threshold for 15 continuous seconds, the system automatically threw a train speed abnormal alarm. The second this popped up on screen, the control center was prompted to send remote braking commands to slow the train down. But remember, the train wasn't actually speeding. Yet, the attacker just kept injecting a steady stream of fake data, showing speeds over 200 kilometers per hour. So, because the spoof data showed the train still accelerating despite the braking commands, the automated safety logic panicked. Assuming a catastrophic mechanical failure, like the brakes were completely gone, the system triggered the ultimate failsafe. It issued a command to completely cut the third-track power supply, generating a massive emergency stop alert. Which leads us to Section 6. Analyzing the workflow. How exactly does one fake speed reading escalate to a completely dead train? Following the control center's logic loop reveals the fatal flaw here. The system asks, is the speed limit exceeded for 15 seconds? Yes? Okay, issue an alert and send a brake command. Then it asks, after another 15 seconds, is the speed still increasing? Because of the spoofed data stream, the system thinks the answer is yes. And that final yes forces the logic from a simple speed alert straight into a fatal power cutoff command. The programmable logic controller violently disconnects the traction power. The safety mechanism operated exactly as designed, but it was acting on entirely false premises. The real-world consequences of manipulating that single digital variable were immense. The train immediately lost traction power. The physical emergency stop systems violently engaged. Passengers were stranded on live tracks, completely in the dark. And because of the cascading safety protocols of the entire railway, this one isolated incident caused a massive 48-minute system-wide service disruption. Think about that. A 23-year-old student physically halted thousands of tons of metal without ever laying a finger on the train itself. So, I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to consider. We rely heavily on smart infrastructure to keep us safe and efficient. But as this explainer clearly illustrates, the very safety mechanisms designed to protect us can be hijacked and weaponized through simple data spoofing. Are our highly connected, automated safety systems truly protecting us, or are they just fragile vulnerabilities waiting to be exploited by a cheap radio? It is a delicate balance, for sure, and one we absolutely must secure as our world becomes more interconnected. Thanks for joining me today, and keep questioning the data.